for episode 19. Today we are talking about the disease to please. Are you a people pleaser? And I am coming to you today from Florida. I'm on vacation right now. And Kim is coming to you from her home, but she's got some exciting things planned, vacations planned. So I'm happy for her. Thank you for those of you who are joining us live. We are so thrilled with the people that show up for us every Tuesday morning and join in the conversation. That means more than you know. We really do appreciate that. So welcome, Kim. How you doing today?
I'm good. Kellyanne, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. Is
Well,
it
when you're
warm?
on vacation, you can't not be good, right?
I know. It's warm, right? Is it like it's
Oh,
already warm this morning?
oh yeah. We had our sat outside at 7 o'clock this morning having our coffee. So it's about going to be 30 today.
Oh yeah, that's warm. Well, I'm looking forward to that because I just booking my trip. I was telling Kellyanne I'm booking a trip today, so we are excited for that. I'm gonna go from like extreme like colder temperatures when I go away for my little mini vacation, and then when I go away with my family vacation, I'm going to go somewhere hot, which I'm looking forward to. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this morning. Good morning, Jeannie. So good to see you here with us. Please say hi in the chat. Let us know that you're here. And let us know what you are looking forward to about this conversation about people pleasing. When Kellyanne and I did this brain dump, I don't know, maybe a month ago or so, maybe more than that. I've lost track of all the things that we could talk about. People pleasing is definitely something that we both have experienced and continue to have worked through in some level, depending. But then also we know that I definitely see it a lot with my clients, and so they're conversations that we need to have. And I hope that you guys, those of you that are tuning in, ladies, men, whoever you are, please let us know what you're looking forward to with today's conversation. So when I think about people pleasing, of course, there's probably lots of different definitions, but bottom line is I think of a person who it's like you, and we help and we do, and the way we act and the way we please people is for different reasons, right? And sometimes it can be coming from a really great space, but it's that person who struggles to say no. It's the person who has a hard time not being able to put their own needs and being able to be themselves, speak about the things that they want to speak about, say no over somebody else. And there's many reasons why we struggle with it, but bottom line is, and I see it a lot, like with the work that I do, and also it's all part of my own journey growing up, right? I look back on that, but like this inability to be able to do what's right for you, because we I think as social creatures, we want to belong. I think that that's a natural need, that we want to belong. We want to feel like we're a part of something. But a lot of times we can somehow lose that connection with ourselves, and we put other people before ourselves, and it causes us a lot of problems.
It sure does. And I think evolutionary speaking, it's
Mm,
important to know that that is how we needed to be way back in the day when we were in the tribe, where if you weren't a part of the tribe, if you weren't liked, if you were neglected from the tribe, it was a matter of life and death.
mhm,
So that is part of our evolution, that, as you say, we have this need to belong. And it comes from a very strong place of it was a matter of life or death. Because if the tribe didn't like you, you
mhm,
couldn't survive on your own.
mhm,
Um, so I think so many of us, for me, a lot of it comes from a place of worthiness,
mhm,
I think, is that almost, and we've talked about this before, that constant need to prove your worth.
mhm,
And when you are doing things for other people, you are getting that external validation.
mhm.
Um, and to say no to somebody or to say no to something, there's a fear. There's a fear that that person's not going to like me, that person's going to think less of me. And so I think so much of it goes back to our sense of self-worth. And it's easy to fall into people pleasing if you have struggled with your worth. There are certainly other reasons for sure, but I guess I'm speaking from my place of healing and wound. It's definitely that self-worth piece.
Yeah, 100%. And that's exactly it. We've got our own stories and where that played a role. I mean, for me, it was 100% related to self-esteem and needing to fit in, needing to be loved, needing to be liked. And we learn that. We learn that as little young people, right? We watch how we are responded to. I was talking about this yesterday in a post. We look around what makes people laugh, what makes people smile. We see what makes me be in the in crowd, what makes me stay over here. Oh, I'm going to change myself because I want to be over there in that in crowd, right? And for many people, it is this doing for other people. And unfortunately, if we look at, and the research speaks about this, that often the people who are the controllers, the people who have not good intentions, will find those people pleasing personalities. And it's like the strong personality, and then it's like, oh, me, love me, love me, love me, I'll love you. And then in comes that unhealthy relationship that so many people fall into, right? And I mean, there's levels of people pleasing and how it can impact our life, but I've seen it. I've seen it with clients where there's this constant need to apologize for themselves, to dismiss their voice, and you see that. And it takes time. I mean, I want to talk about that today, like to recognize the challenges that plays in our life, and how do we start to move away from it? Because I know that the women that I'm working with that are around my age bracket and older than me, they're recognizing those patterns, right? Because we've if I again, I'll speak about this, like this sense of who am I? So if we have a lot of people pleasing tendencies, and we have morphed ourselves to be someone who we think we're supposed to be in order to fit in, and not even to fit in, Kellyanne. It's also to keep the peace. It's also to like, I want to just, make things be smooth. I don't want to disrupt anything. And so I'm just going to go along with what this person says just because I don't want to have to deal with conflict. I'm not good with conflict. So all of a sudden we start to slip away from who we are. And then we get to a point in our lives, whatever that might be, or life shakes us up and we start to go like, who am I? And we have to be able to return to that and learn who that person is. But, I think about my people pleasing, and it exhausted me.
Mm.
When I had, when my, before I left my career, I think I had like 75 fitness instructors underneath me, and I had 5 clubs, and I had this need to make everything be the best it could be and make sure that everybody, was happy with me because I was struggling so much with my self-worth at that time. And imagine trying to please that many personalities. Talk about exhausting. And, to make sure that everybody in the home front's okay too, right?
Exactly. It is, and I think that's one of the outcomes of people pleasing is that there is exhaustion. There is, huge time commitments. There is time away from you, and I think that it is. And I had an interesting conversation with somebody one day who said that, well, sometimes it's just the right thing to do. They were doing something that I thought was maybe beyond what they should have been doing, just because their life was stressful as it was, and it just seemed like an added thing. And they said to me, "Yeah, but it's the right thing to do. If I don't do it, who's going to do it?" And I think there's a really fine line between compassion and people pleasing.
Mhm.
We want to be compassionate. And of course, compassion is wonderful. It's when it comes at the expense of ourselves and the love that we have for ourselves. Now, Hey, we love, there's so many people in our lives that we love, and so many times that we do sacrifice for other people.
Of
And
course.
that to me is not people pleasing.
Mhm,
That is loving on people.
mhm,
So, when your child asks you, when my kids were young and they would ask me to drive them somewhere, and I didn't want to do that,
mhm,
but I did it because I love them. And
mhm,
that's part of how I love people, is doing things that might not feel great for me at the time,
mhm,
but there's not a resentment. I
mm,
think that's when you know if it's compassion and sacrificing for people you love. And we all are going to do things that we don't want to do. Of
mhm,
course, that's just part of being a human, is that you might help a friend that you would really rather have that day to yourself, but you might agree to go and help that friend. But the difference is, do you have resentment for that?
mhm,
Because if you spend your day in resentment, then that to me is a sign of people pleasing. Sometimes we do things for other people, and we kind of go that extra mile, and we might not want to do it, but it doesn't feel like resentment. It
mhm,
feels like love. It
mhm.
feels like helping. So it's a totally different feeling. And I think that's how you know the difference between kind of being empathetic, being caring, being compassionate, being kind, and then that whole idea of people pleasing.
Yeah, the energy always tells us, right? For the most part. I think about that too, like where it's like what you said, well, if I don't help, like it's the right thing to do. Or it's like, well, if I don't do it, who will?
Hmm.
And we see people, or you know what I also think it's also, well, this person has helped me so many times.
Hmm.
And so I owe this back to them, right? Like this give, and it's like I only giving to receive back. And that's not why we should do things for people with an expectation of giving it back. But again, this comes back to a person's self-worth, right?
Hmm.
But the energy doesn't lie. And ultimately, you have to start to really recognize that because when you are, there's a great expression that when I say yes to you, I'm ultimately going to be saying no to somebody else. And I know that one of the things that helped me at the beginning of my journey is to really understand what my values were, what's important to me. And then because I struggled a lot with people pleasing, it's one of the reasons why I actually went online with my business as opposed to meeting with people in person,
Hmm.
so that I was able to have that space, you know.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
but but ultimately, we have to pay attention to what feels right and learn how to be okay with, like, when we say no to someone, there is going to potentially be disappointment. Okay,
Hmm.
there's going to be disappointment, and that's okay. And how can you sit with that and learn that you're not here to make everybody else's life better all the time, right? It's just it's part of life, is that we're not always going to get everything that we need. And I think it comes down to looking at the circumstances. And there's a way of being kind to someone that you love. Like I've had to do it before where it's like, I love this person, I respect them, they've helped me out a lot, but I don't have anything right now.
Hmm.
How can I communicate that to somebody in a loving way,
Hmm.
but still make sure that I'm meeting my own needs? And that is, I talk about this all the time. That is a muscle. That is something that we practice,
Yeah.
right? Which I think is really important that we get into that today. Is like if we recognize, and those of you that are here live, if you recognize that yourself as a people pleaser, like, just I think it's so important that we acknowledge that. Like there's no shame around it. It's something that we've
Yeah.
learned,
Hmm.
right? And a lot of the time it was modeled to us, if we saw
Hmm.
that. And I think as women too, we haven't really touched on that, but like often it's women that are asked to do things. We're the ones that run the households. And there's a great expression that says, if you want something done, ask a busy person
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
they'll figure out a way, right?
You're right. You're right. And I think you know, I don't believe that you can be the best version of yourself until you can love yourself unconditionally.
Mhm,
And I think when you start to become aware of that people pleasing behavior and how it is affecting your love for yourself, if you are lying to yourself, if you are actually lying to other people, you are lying to yourself.
Mhm.
So when you say to somebody asks you to do something and you don't want to do it, or you don't feel you can do it, and you say yes to it,
Mhm.
you are lying to that person, but you're also lying to yourself. You're not in integrity with yourself. And I really, and that's not to pass judgment on yourself. It's just, again, that awareness that we talk about so much, Kim, that awareness of why you're doing that, and what are what are the ways that you can start to get honest, um, about what you're saying and what you're doing with people. I always love the phrase that you teach people how to treat you.
Yeah.
And I have used that, oh my gosh, so many times in my life.
Mm.
And it's so true with this too. Like, as you said, like, if you kind of ask a busy person, if you need help out. So if you have always done, I think we have people in our lives who maybe expect more from us than other people. If you
Mhm.
have always been the people pleaser for
Mhm.
certain people in your life, they're
Mhm.
always going to come back to you.
Mhm.
You have taught them
Yes.
how to treat you.
Mhm.
And that's not to blame you.
Mhm.
That's just to, again, be curious, become aware. I've taught them that it's okay for them to ask. I've taught them that I will always say yes. And if you make a decision that I'm not going to do that anymore, first of all, making that decision will change everything for you. But then let it be a slow process. It doesn't have to be, okay, now I'm not doing anything. But
Yes.
as you say, start to use the muscle, start to practice, even with little things, saying
Mhm.
no. And it's not easy. It's actually one of the hardest things to do, from what kind of the research says. One of the hardest things to do is to stop that people pleasing behavior.
Mhm.
And sometimes it requires the help of a therapist or a coach,
Mhm.
because it really does take, taking a deep dive into why you're doing it, and how you can adjust your thinking, how you can adjust those expectations, how you can set the boundaries, all those things. Um, but don't be afraid to start small.
Yeah. And you're talking about the act of saying no, which is fantastic. So even like with that, practice, as silly as this might feel for people, practice saying no to no one. Like
Mm.
literally like,
Mhm.
no. Because
Yeah.
how often I seem to be all full of expressions today, but when we say yes to something, we say yes. But what do we do, Kellyanne, when we say no to something? What do we feel like we need to do? Do you know? I'm quizzing you right
An,
now.
an excuse?
Yeah,
We need
excuse
to
or
give an
explain
excuse.
ourselves. We
Yeah.
explain ourselves. Well,
Yeah.
here's why I have to say no. So even that act of practicing saying no and get used to it coming out of your mouth. Now, I mean, I don't know if I would ever, it's not in my nature. Well, I have said it to my kids, but it's not in my nature to just say no. I'll say something like, "You know what? I can't right now, but thank you
Mhm.
for asking." That's how I'll do it. I won't just be like, "No." Like that
Mhm.
doesn't feel like I feel like I don't know. It's just not who I am. But the other thing I think is really important in this act of people pleasing is even learning how to meet your own needs. It's that practice. How can I meet my own needs? And I want to suggest to everybody that's listening today is to work on starting with small, like one small little thing. Where can I meet a need of mine today? That doesn't even necessarily, like yesterday, I said, I'm going to just watch some television and I'm going to meet my need because I need to stop and pause and relax. And that was meeting a need of mine. So where else can you meet a need of yours? Or maybe you look for an opportunity where I think we have to start, like, for people that have a lot of history with this, is finding where I can do this safely, where I can feel safe, because ultimately that's what we need. Is your spouse or your friend says, where do you want to go out for dinner? And you're used to saying, oh, well, I know that she really likes this restaurant,
Mhm.
so I'm just going to tell her, let's go back there. But you know that you actually want to go and visit this restaurant. Like, that's a perfect example of starting to meet your, so this people pleasing doesn't have to be always about saying no to someone. It's also about saying yes to me. Right?
Yes, exactly.
Mhm.
And I think that you can also start by being honest um, with the people that you love. And I do this with my kids and with my husband. I will say if they ask me to do something and I don't really want to do it,
Mhm.
I will say to them, you know what? I don't really want to do that, but because I love you, I'll do it. And I think that teaches people that, you know, it teaches people that you are not lying to yourself, and it also teaches you that you're not lying to yourself.
Mhm.
um, and and I think it's, as you were talking about, Kim, taking that time for yourself. Maybe one of the first steps is that self-care, that, you know what, this time of the day is a sacred time to me. And so between this hour and this hour, I'm not going to say yes to anything,
Mhm.
because that is a sacred time for me. And you would be surprised when you start saying to people, and I mean, I know I really respect when people will say to me,
Mhm.
no, I can't do that because, and I know we say because, and that's okay, but you can say because that is my yoga time, and that's I do that for me. I respect people who say that.
I do too.
And so when we can start being honest about those things, um, then I think we start to gain people's respect. And then it becomes easier when we do want to say no to something. They've heard us not necessarily say no, but they've heard us kind of talk about our own needs. They've heard us talk about, maybe I'd rather not do that, but I will do it right now for you. Um, because again, we teach people how to treat us. So if we are giving them those signals, if we're giving them those boundaries, and also, if somebody asks us to do something, instead of leaving it open ended with them, say, okay, yeah, I've got between 1 and 3 today that I can help you, right?
Mhm.
Because if you don't set those boundaries, that's when the resentment, because then you go assuming, okay, I'm going to be here for 2 hours, and the day ends up going on for 4 hours because you're helping with something, and you're getting resentful, you're angry, and you feel like you can't leave the situation. So if you set your own boundaries, then people know what you're willing to give.
And follow through with those self boundaries.
Exactly. Yes.
Right? Yeah,
Yes.
I wrote down a couple ideas, just to support this conversation, and you definitely talked about a couple of them. And one of them was time limit. So giving yourself that space of time each day that is yours. And that is a great way to start to practice this, because I think for people, let's be real, and I can speak about it from myself, like for people that are feeding their self-worth through the act of doing for others,
Mhm.
when you recognize that that's no longer working for you and you have to start to create more space for yourself, there's going to become discomfort with that.
Mm. Oh, yeah.
So it's all part of that healing journey for sure. But creating those spaces. I'm also talking about, so you talked about, like, I wrote down here time limits, right? So it could also be that, this is, you can say, this is the window of time I'm able to help you today, or this is the length of time that I can help you today. Going back to what you also said about talking about, I really don't want to do this, but I will do this for you. I think by talking like that, it also, if the other person on the other end, the recipient, if they're listening,
Mhm.
and they care about you, they might actually start to think differently. And I think that's the difference too. The people that are going to turn their noses, get upset with us, judge us, talk about us behind their back, when we start to put our own needs first, we know
Mhm.
that they had ill intentions, right? Like the people that are upset about it, it's really speaks to the people who love us and the people
Mhm.
who were just taking advantage of us, right?
Yeah.
The other another suggestion here that I want to suggest, and I know I've done this for myself, is sometimes when we automatically say yes, because we naturally do, it's become a habit, or we just think that we can do it all. Some of us just think we can do it all too. That was me. I can do it all, right? Is
Mhm.
to give yourself that space. Even if you think you want to do it, okay? Give yourself that space, and whether that be a practice the pause in the moment and really check
Mhm.
in with your gut, or it's also saying, you know what? Thank you for asking me. I'm going to get back to you tomorrow.
Exactly.
Giving
Mhm.
yourself that space to actually check in, to like look at your calendar. I was that type of person, Kellyanne, where, well, I still am working on this, where I look at my calendar and I'll see where I've got blocks of time. So
Mhm.
in my mind will go, oh, I have time in there to meet a friend for coffee. I have a time in there to help somebody on Zoom. Forgetting though that what I have on the other sides of that requires my energy.
Mhm.
And so we have to really start to pay attention to the things. There are certain people, I will say this, there are certain people that can drain us. So as we're working on this healing journey, which is essentially what so much about what this podcast is about, is
Mhm.
our own personal growth and healing, recognize that that takes energy.
Mhm.
And you need to be able to create that space for yourself.
Yeah.
And those blocks of time allow you to reevaluate it, allows you to look at it differently. Or maybe you're going to say, you know what, I can help you, but I can't do it on Tuesday. Can we find another time? So you get to
Ex
really check in with your personal values that way,
Yeah.
and make those decisions. Yeah, I think we all need that.
Yeah, and I mean, all the things, all the committees you're asked to be on, the boards, all the roles, all the friends, all the things that you could be doing, they're important. They are important, but you really have to say to yourself, what are my priorities?
Mhm.
And you need to be your number one priority. I've learned I am very much an introvert. I cannot I cannot go from one thing to the other through the day. I need my time by myself. So I have learned that I can't say yes to things. I mean, people have asked me to do things, and I think, yeah, that's a great, I love that idea of doing that. I mean, it sounds so worthwhile, but can I really do that and feel good about me? And if the answer is no, then I say no. And sometimes that might not come across. Some people might, see that as, well, you know, why wouldn't she do that? But I think people pleasing feels really good in the short term, right?
Mhm.
It feels like I'm keeping the peace, I'm making everybody happy, I'm getting all this external validation. Feels really good in the short term. But in the long term, it doesn't feel good, because in the long term, you are not being honest with yourself.
Mhm.
So that's, and so many of us want that instant gratification. So it's easier just to say yes, right? You know what? With our kids, remember when our kids were young? And I say this to my daughter now, who has a 4-year-old. The easiest thing in the world is to say yes, because you don't have the fights, it keeps the peace, it keeps everything calm.
Yeah.
The hardest thing is to say no. And yeah, it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be uncomfortable to change
Mhm.
this if you struggle with this. But I think in the end, the long term benefits of making yourself a priority and being honest with yourself, it's going to serve you in the end.
It sure does. And it reminds me too, like for anyone that needs to hear this, if someone feels a certain way when you put yourself first, you're not making them feel that way. You don't give somebody feelings. This is something that's their own personal journey, right?
Mhm,
So I see this a lot. Like I've had a lot of conversations, Kellyanne, with my daughter about this because,
mhm,
of course, our children are often very close to what they saw their parents model,
mhm,
right? Um,
mhm,
and we talk about this a lot is to be able because you literally see when you make that decision, you make that decision that's the hardest decision for yourself because you really, especially I find it's the ones where you really genuinely care for somebody
mhm,
and you have to say no to them, but
mhm,
you know down deep, it's like the best thing that you could do, which ultimately is the most loving way for you to be with that person.
mhm.
It takes such a weight off of you.
Oh, yeah.
We can carry around this pressure.
Mhm,
And when you finally make that decision and you learn how to do that, and you might actually have somebody that says, "I totally get it. I
mhm.
totally get it. I'm glad that you're doing what's right for you." And you're like, "Whew, that is a good person in my life," right?
Exactly. And the
You
more people that do this, the more people you will run into who say that.
That's exactly right.
Because they know that they have prioritized themselves,
Mhm,
and so they will appreciate it in other people.
mhm. Such a good conversation. We have a lot of conversation here in the chat.
Yes.
Thank you everyone for tuning in. There's a lot of people resonating with this and we're recognizing where it's playing a role in our life. And I just want to remind us all, you start with baby steps and you
Mhm.
start to, because I think if we try to make these drastic changes, we won't do it. Again, these are safety. This is how we've stayed safe for
Yeah,
many of us, right?
and remove the judgment,
Mhm.
right? This is not to blame yourself. This is to get curious. Get curious why you're doing these things, and
Mhm.
then get curious as to what if I make some changes? What's that going to look like for me?
Yeah, and like if I do disappoint someone and they are vocal about it, well then that's going to have me learn new conflict resolution. And it's just it the point is life is here for us to be able to learn along the way because
Mhm.
this act of learning how to take care of my own needs is going to open up other opportunities where more personal growth and healing is required, and it's
Yeah,
all beautiful.
yeah,
It's
exactly.
it's
We're
well.
here to grow. Nobody said it was going to be a cakewalk, and it's not easy, but we are here to grow and to expand into the best versions of ourselves that we can be.
So Joanne, you asked the question in here, disease to please, like it's a dis-ease. There's a dis-ease within ourselves when we're trying to please other people. So that's where that's coming from. Both the call to please, yeah. So maybe if I would have went
Oh,
dis-ease,
yeah.
the medical background, it's like, but it's not a medical condition. Why
No,
are we
it's not. You're right.
Good point, Joanne. I love it. I love it.
Mhm.
Yeah, so let's all just I know for me, I've had to really work on this in my business, right? Like especially I'll just speak about it for me with me having when I provide my one-on-one clients with tech support between our calls. I've had to really like that's been a tough one for me at the beginning, right? Is this because again, I was when I started this business, I was and still am healing, right?
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
really had to really check that because y- we know that our phones are with us, and when somebody, especially, I've had some clients that really, you know, they were having some tough challenges, and so being able to. I want to be able to support people, but like I can't be available all the time. And
Yeah.
so I had to learn how to sit with that. And for
Mhm.
sometimes I had to literally like put my phone in another room, Kellyanne. I'm like, no touching the phone.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
ultimately, like I do, like not all of my stuff came from an unhealthy place. I genuinely care. There's a term that I
Oh,
had not heard of before, and the term is altruism, to help
yep,
others,
yeah.
right? So we have to know the difference between genuinely wanting to be there to help someone
Mm,
else because you care, because you love, because you're kind and generous. That's not
mhm.
what we're talking about here. We're talking about, again, this distinction of not being able to say no and really finding yourself suffering because of that in one way or another.
Right, right.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Well, great conversation again, Kim. I think it's again, I hope that what we have done is just given you a chance to be curious and consider, because that's how we grow, is we get curious, we ask ourselves questions. So thank you to all of those who have been with us live. Again, we so appreciate you being here. And Kim and I, obviously, as many of you know, are coaches. I am a mindset and manifestation coach. I support women 40 and over who are ready to create a life that they love. And right now, I have a program that is open, called Radiance. So if you're interested, please come in and see me over on my social media.
I
Kim?
love it. I love it. Yeah, absolutely. I will talk. I'm going to take a moment to talk about my empowered movement community. I'm going to talk about that beautiful space today. This is a space, a community for women that are dedicated to holistic health. So we talk everything in this space, and I support women in there on everything from a mind, body, soul level. That space initially was created as a place for me to bring my skill set and my love for movement, otherwise known as exercise. So it's an on demand movement space, but it's so much more than that. It is a beautiful community of women who are on this path of helping themselves while also wanting to be of support to other people. So a community might be facilitated and created by me, but it is everything that we are together that makes it so special. So my community has a 2-week trial. If anybody wants to give it a try and ask questions about it, it's for everyone. Well, it is not for everyone. It's for women. That's what we have, our own little special space. The boys can make their own special spaces if they wish and choose to, but this
Exactly.
is for the women. But I love supporting people and helping you on your healing journey, especially with my expertise on helping you with your relationships with food. Anyone who has a relationship with food that doesn't feel like it's supporting them anymore and you need some support with that, I am here for that. All mindset, all self-love, all the things that I have worked on in my own self. So not only do I have the skill set, but I got the personal experience. So I am here with you. Yeah. Thanks,
And
Leanne, for this conversation.
it looks like it's Women's Day. I didn't realize it was today. So happy Women's Day. Joanne
Tomorrow.
said,
Tomorrow.
oh, it's
Tomorrow.
tomorrow?
I think it's
Okay.
tomorrow.
Okay. Okay.
Mhm.
So enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next Tuesday, same time, same place. Have a great day.
Bye, everyone. Take